All right then. We'll have to do a brief recap of the question that Akshay asked, because we went here and there and talked about several things which might confuse if we don't focus on the actual question that Akshay asked. You had said difference between caste, jati, and varna, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I had talked to you about caste, but
Yes,
for the sake of a context, let me very quickly recapitulate the caste angle. Please remember that caste as such is not an English word. It's a Portuguese word. When the English came to India and colonized it, uh, they were slightly flummoxed by the practices, social practices that existed in this country. Uh, I'm not going to go into the various difficulties that the English faced in India. We'll stick to this thing called uh, caste. Now, what happened is that the British were not familiar with the kind of endogamy that existed in India. What they were seeing were two things. One thing that they saw is that people belonging to different uh, strata of society married with those in their own strata. Okay, when I'm talking about strata here, I'm talking about, the identity like Brahman uh, or Kshatriya, call it whatever you want. So they were completely unfamiliar with one, these denominations, and two, with the practice of endogamy, and three, with the practice of arranged marriages. Okay, till today, many people are completely, uh, many people, meaning not Indians, people from other countries, all these people, uh, they were essentially not used to the idea of somebody finding a life partner. people usually found their own life partners in the West. So here we had this system of arranged marriages, and the system of arranged marriages is what kept endogamy alive. Okay, so they saw this phenomenon and they found that there was no word in English to describe these stratified groupings of people. So, like I told you, they borrowed the Portuguese word, which uh, which will which is caste. Now, caste, I told you, is not a sufficiently adequate. Uh, it's not a sufficiently adequate. What should I say? Uh, Category to explain endogamy. Okay, because caste is a closed community. It's a closed community. So you could have all those people who wanted to understand if they wanted a democracy, they would all gather together and in the West, that is, and it was mandatory to give some kind of an allegiance to the group or the community. So you could co-opt people into it, but it closed once people were co-opted. So caste is not really a completely closed group. It is something which is in the nature of a closed community of people, but people could get in and out of caste groupings in Portugal. But in India, that is not the case because social denominations are almost innumerable in India. And if you look at the innumerable uh, groupings as such, what we find is that there is uh, a problem. And the problem is that these are completely closed groupings and ignoring people from other groupings. So that is how it was. So the British found the nearest European word to describe what was happening in India. And they came up with this thing called caste. caste is not what the closed groupings were, the endogamous groupings. If you're looking at the whole idea of stratification, that is not explained by caste. So you'll say upper caste, lower caste. That is the only way you can describe, right? And the British were even more confused because texts basically suggested the Chaturvarna system. But what they found is that a number of social segments, social strata, which did not fall into the Chaturvarna system. And therefore, in order to ease themselves of the difficulty that they were facing, they simply called it a caste. And when it came to, filling up of several different kinds of government pro forma, you would find that the uh, British, if you are not a Muslim, if you are not a Christian, if you are not a, what should I say, if you are not a Jew, by the way, there was a very strong Jewish presence in India at one time. So if you didn't belong to these religions, when that column came, they simply wrote Hindu. Okay, I have many times told you the story of how the word Hindu came from Persian. Uh, it was actually, India was called Sapta Sindhu, not the peninsular part, but the northern part. Sapta Sindhu because Sindhu is the main river and there were 6 other rivers. So Sapta Sindhu was what it was called. But when it went to Persia, incidentally, I don't know if I told you this. If I am repeating myself, my apologies for it. But I don't know if I told you this. Persia was not the name given to Iran by the Westerners. Iran was always Iran. A part of Iran was actually called Persia, 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 or it was also called Persis, Persis, Persis. So it was a smaller territory in the country called Iran. Now, if you look at, if you basically look at uh, the whole thing about Iran and Persia, the language, we calling it Persian, is again an English thing because they only understood Persia. They didn't understand, sorry, Iran. So they gave the designation of uh, Persian as such. You know, when I went to the United States on a couple of occasions, I was asked, so your language is Indian. How is it? Uh, how does it compare with other languages? I said, Indian is not a language. There are 700 languages and dialects in India. There is no language called Indian. But I'm sure in universities there, at least somewhere in the States, people are talking about Indian language. So that's how Persian happened, like Indian language. Anyway, so during the reign of Darius the first, you will see that they came to know about uh, the Sapta Sindhu. In the Persian language, uh, the, the Sa sound is very rare. So the most common sound in it is Kha, not Ha, Kha. You have to aspirate in your throat. Kha. So during Darius's time, India Sapta Sindhu became Hapta Hindu. That's what it became. Hapta Hindu. So that is how the word Hindu came into prominence. Okay, they called people living on the other side of Sindhu, it was called Hindu. And the Latin, this thing of uh, the Sindhu is Indus. So people living on the other side, on the eastern side of the river Indus, came to be called Indians. And when colonialism happened, they gave this the name India. That is how it came into prominence. Previously, the word did exist in the English language. It's not as if it did not exist, but it was not widely used. But once the British started administering the country, you find that the word India becomes pretty regular. Now, you see, I'm dwelling on these points to tell you that how history should not be simplified. It should not be simplified. And Unfortunately, even somebody like Ambedkar, who was a pretty good intellectual, very well educated, even he made the mistake of falling into the trap of the insufficiency of the English language. So that is the reason why he keeps using the word caste. Around the 70s, late 70s and early 80s, people found that caste was not appropriate. So what did they do? They made it into, they said, let's pick up an Indian word to describe this. Now, Indian word, obviously, because of the domination of the, because of the domination of the, what should I say, the uh, uh, English. Jati was used as a substitute. Now, I had discussed a bit about Jati with you. Jati is, has he come? Send him here. So, Jati is something which is, which was picked up by North Indian intellectuals because of the Hindi influence, and also this particular word comes from the highly Sanskritized Hindi, which is called Shuddha Hindi. Okay, for example, if you have to translate intellectual into Hindi, the translation that people do is Buddhijeevi. You mean to say others don't have Buddhi? Buddhijeevi, intellectual. Okay. An intellectual in English is somebody who's capable of intellection. They are capable of intellection. What is intellection? Intellection is the ability to uh, basically, uh, what should I say, uh, to, what was I saying? Can you, one sec,
Intellectuals.
1 minute. Azim, वालेकुम सलाम. ये आंध्रा बैंक है ना, आंध्रा बैंक में ये पैसे लेके एसबीआई में डिपॉजिट कर दो. ये कितने नोट है वो देख लेके, हाँ, वो कर देने के बाद थोड़ा ये हेलमेट का ये गिर के ये हो गया, रिपेयर करने वाले, ये रिपेयर होता, देखिए अगर रिपेयर नहीं होता बोल के बोले तो एक नया, हाँ वो हेलमेट वर्ल्ड है ना, तो वहां से ऐसा ही टाइप का, ऐसा ही टाइप का दे, ये क्या पे दे रहा हूँ। नीचे गिर गया वो। वहाँ लेके शुक्रिया। उन्नीस 40। ठीक है, थैंक यू। हाँ 1940। हाँ इसके लिए माया मैडम से। Sorry, there is something that has to be done now, and I have been a little distracted. Now that that job is out of the way, let's hope I won't be distracted. Yeah, so we are talking about intellectual. If you talk about an intellectual is one who's capable of thinking. Okay, so when you call somebody an intellectual, you are saying that this person is somebody who uses his mind more than his body. Okay, for example, you wouldn't call Virat Kohli an intellectual. You wouldn't. Why? Because Virat Kohli is a sportsman, but he's not capable of, incapable of intellection. He is very much, uh, he is very much a part of, intellection is very much a part of his strategizing on the field when they're playing cricket. So intellection everybody is capable of. But those who rely only on that, they came to be called intellectuals. In fact, Noam Chomsky is anti-intellectual. He says nobody should be called intellectuals because everybody is an intellectual. Everybody has intellect, mind, and the ability to think. So he says, so and so is an intellectual is a pejorative thing, something negative. Okay, so now when you translate it into buddhijeevi, I really don't know what that means. Buddhi is enlightenment. Jivi is a person. Intellectual is a process. But here we have made a person out of it by translating that into intellectual into buddhijivi. Okay, so these translations are those which basically are inaccurate, and they very often portray a wrong picture. So the same thing happened with caste first and then with Jati. Why did it happen with Jati? Jati is a Hindi word. Okay. But have you ever heard two speaking people ask one another, आप कौन से जाति के हैं? Do you ask that? Jati, the nearest translation to Jati is what do we call uh, race. Okay, it's a race. So are people in different jati groupings, as you're calling them, are they people who belong to different races? I mean, at one level, people are saying that there is no such thing as different races. Okay, I must have told you 100 times by now that the stupid classification that the Americans do, Caucasoid, Mongoloid, Negroid, it's all rubbish. It is completely rubbish. On the basis of features of somebody's appearance, their color, you can't say that they are a different race. They are the same race. There is only one race. It's a human race. So, what exactly are we saying, implying by jati? What exactly are we implying with jati? We are implying that they are different races. Is that correct? I don't think so. Because there's no different race. And when the European nation states formed, they formed on the basis of commonalities. The Westphalian nation system came into being on the basis of commonalities. But the Indian nation state, I don't know if you have ever been into Bihar, Jharkhand, they're almost like foreign countries. What I mean by that is that what we see in other parts of India, like in the south, you don't see it in the north. You don't see it in the north, especially Bihar and Jharkhand. So, if you're talking about Jati, how does it indicate a closed group, an endogamous group? How does it do that? Now, those who defend the idea of Jati, they say that Jatis are based in the professions that people have. If somebody belongs to one particular profession, then they become one Jati. What about the Chatur Chaturvarna must have become Panchama Jati, five Jatis, because the untouchables came in. And so if you're looking at these, how are you calling them Jatis? On the basis of work that they do? In English, you call a cobbler a cobbler. Okay? But here, people give themselves different designations. Chamar is not a cobbler. Chamar is one who skins dead animals. But you will call a cobbler a chamar. So the idea that people will be, what should I say? The idea that people uh, are divided into various categories on the basis of the work that they do, that doesn't hold water. That really doesn't hold water. Especially now. I mean, anyone can, who has some interest and ability, can become a doctor, can become an engineer. Everybody can become a code writer, algorithm writer. So it's not that either. It's not Jati either. And like I said, the biggest problem in that is the fact that it will confuse you with race. And I mentioned this to you uh, a few years ago. There was a conference in Durban, I think, in South Africa, where people were trying to classify different people on the basis of race. They felt that there weren't enough uh, denominations to suggest the different races. So, if you have heard of Kancha Ilaya, I do not know. Kancha Ilaya went to that conference, and a big contingent of Indians raised a demand to say the caste system should be treated as a race. People of different castes are different races. Are they? Times have changed. Now so many North Indians marry South Indians. I am married to somebody who is half Bengali and half British. So what race are we talking about? What race are we talking about? Another colleague by the name of Kausar Azam, she argued that Muslims are a separate race. Fortunately, in that conference, both the ideas were rejected. But the unfortunate part is that they tried, they continued, ouch, they continued to trade, they continued to try and define what constitutes a race. I don't think that is necessary. So Jati doesn't explain what exists in India as social stratification. And while you're saying endogamy, okay, and you're saying that is how people maintain their identities. I don't know if you have heard of M.N. Srinivas. M.N. Srinivas is a sociologist. He introduced the concept of Sanskritization because the uppermost stratum is that of the Brahmins. And Brahmins in the ancient period spoke Sanskrit. So he said, while individual mobility from one caste grouping to another caste grouping is not possible, an entire caste grouping can move out of wherever they are. So he worked in Kurk. Please excuse me, I've forgotten the name of that so-called caste. They were Shudras, but they managed to project themselves as upper castes. Now, if you take the Telugu states, as they are now being called, you will find that the Reddis today will be considered upper castes. But originally, the Reddis were Shudras. Reddy is not a caste. Reddy is a title that was given to somebody who collected a tax called Rettadi. Rettadi became Reddy. Now the Kammas worked on fields. They were also apparently page boys, which means they carried messages. No, they don't like being called Kammas. They call themselves Chaudhries. Now, a Chaudhry is one who collected a tax called the Chauta tax. But the Kammas never collected any tax. More importantly, there was no Chauta tax here. It was only up north. But these people have been able to move up out of the Shudra caste and become Chaudhries. Is that a caste, Chaudhary? If it is so, are the Chaudhries of the north similar to these people? Because the Chaudhries of the north, most of them fall under the OBC category. But these people are claiming that they are upper castes. So there are all these contentions. I'll answer that when I finish dealing with the Varna system, Rachna. Remind
Okay, sir.
me that I have to do this. Okay. So, Jati, caste, if there is a grouping that is moving up, then how are you going to describe all these? So the system is complex. I'll stop here now and tomorrow I will not be taking a class because on Monday, if physical classes have to start, I have to go to a doctor tomorrow. So tomorrow we won't have a class. We meet again on Monday, and the evening classes for policy studies also will start on Monday. I hope that is okay with you. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.